You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
Good evening. Happy Friday. Dan Delmar, Sarah DeHay in for Aaron and Natasha. Natasha is back on Monday. This is our last chat, Sarah, for the summer. I'll be off back to work, back to the agency and all of that. So thanks very much for a great week. And obviously, one of my favorite people to talk to is Mr. James Mennie of the Montreal Gazette. Hello, sir.
Dan, you're too kind.
True. I just speak the truth.
I've always said so.
Greg Kelly's on the way next, Liberal M&A for Jacques Cartier. I'm going to challenge him a little bit on what I see as a lackluster defense of minority language rights, especially when we hear, as you may have heard earlier, some of these Dial 9 for English horror stories, and in the healthcare system too. What do you think of their pushback or maybe lack thereof?
From the Liberals?
Yeah.
It's utterly expected. I mean, honestly, you guys could give this party a map, a mirror, an extra set of hands, and they couldn't find their own butt these days. I mean, come on, let's get real here. The Quebec Liberal Party, if anything, the Quebec Liberal Party put itself on the map with Bill 96. And I know they're saying, we voted against it. Yeah, but not until you made it even more difficult for Anglo CJAD students. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. They have a great deal to answer for, and honestly, in that regard, Bill 96 is a tremendous success. It's got nothing to do about it. It is a demonstrable fact that Bill 96 has absolutely nothing to do with protecting the French language. I refer to it regularly as the "wouldn't you be happier someplace else" law, because that's what it is. It's not a matter of running Anglos out of Quebec. It's a matter of nibbling at them incessantly every day with nickel and dime beefs. Whether it's, Allison Haynes' column with the woman who couldn't get service from RAMQ. And we all know what's going to happen here. So at some point, if anybody bothers to ask Dubé about it, once he resurfaces, it's a zealous employee, wasn't supposed to happen, blah, 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 blah. Eric Girard will say, what are you talking about? No, this is not how it's supposed to work, although it is how it works. And that's the idea. But honestly, and I got nothing against Greg Kelly. He seems like a stand-up guy, but the Quebec Liberal Party, give me a break. I'm not waiting for any epiphanies on their part, because don't forget, if nothing else, they're polling 4% with Francophone Quebecers, and in these parts, the only way you can score points, the perception, I should be careful here. The perception politically is that the only way you can score points with Quebec Francophones is to basically go after somebody else. Which is ridiculous, but that is the case. If you turn around and say that what happened here, and once again I'm referring to Allison's column, what happened here is absolutely ridiculous. And in fact, any of the stories we've heard at CJAD, or what happened here is absolutely ridiculous, you won't be criticized by the majority of Francophone Quebecers who will either shrug or just say, oh my God, what's going on here? But you will be criticized by the pack of banshees that make their living screaming about the death of the French language, the perpetual ongoing death of the French language in Quebec and in North America. So in that regard, you can't win. But I just wish for once somebody could push back effectively, say the emperor isn't wearing any clothes, and understand that these diminishments in the use of French, when you're talking about fractions of a percent, get over yourselves. This is nothing more than a mise en scène opera, essentially staged by a lot of people whose livings depend on having a market that speaks French. And for all I know, if the roles were reversed, if English was the majority language in Quebec, but it was surrounded by an ocean of French, maybe I too would be playing the same game. But bottom line, I don't expect anything whatsoever from the Quebec Liberals on this.
James, you wanted to take a look at the opioid crisis back in the headlines in Montreal.
Well, it's crazy because on the one hand, here's Lionel Calmont, the Minister for Health, announcing more than $1 million to deal with overdoses. They're going to be sending more money to the safe injection sites in Montreal. And so, okay, that's fine. And my hat's off to RADCAN because they dropped their report at about the same time or a little before Calmont was going to make his announcement. But they actually got stats I guess that is Agence Santé, about the number of times that their personnel have had to resort to using naloxone, which is basically what you give someone who suffered from an overdose. In 2022, the total number of times is 291 instances. That's the ones we know about. To date, between January and June of this year, we have 163 interventions, and that's halfway through. So we'll probably top last year's total. And my concern is, and one of the things we learned certainly about opioids and certainly about fentanyl, is that yes, it is an issue in terms of the homeless. Yes, it is an issue in terms of the legalization or not legalization of drugs. But this is not somebody else's problem. Well, we learned 3 or 4 years ago that fentanyl had become a white collar drug of choice, and I don't know if you guys remember, and I think it was maybe 3 years ago. There was a double overdose. Two men were found in a car on Delorme, and the cops realized this is serious. And I can recall that in the ensuing 2 weeks, I think they arrested 10 or 12 people. Everybody whose hands that fentanyl that they'd OD'd on had gone through was arrested. I'm not criticizing the cops on this. They have a lot on their plate these days. But the fact is, opioids are out there. They are a growing threat, and quite literally, a hazard to human life. And it's unclear what road we're going to take. Personally, I don't think legalization, across the board legalization, as some people are calling for, is going to help the situation. But honestly, something's going to have to be done, because this is very, very serious stuff. And the fact that even this government in the middle of summer was able to cough up $1.2 million to at least put some straw in the hole in the dike wall suggests that they're realizing the extent of the problem.
Lastly, just we're almost out of time, James, but in a few seconds, your thoughts on 3 in 4 Canadians thinking that their government federally is misspending their taxes. And I've always thought that once the whiff of corruption sets in federally, all bets are off.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because this is an Ipsos poll that was conducted for the Montreal Economic Institute. And the one takeaway I have from it is that people are angry. They're angry about the economy. They're angry about money. They're angry about inflation. On the one hand, more than half of them, I think that government spending over the last 3 years is contributing to inflation, which is an arguable point. They also say that high taxes could force the rich to relocate in another jurisdiction. But another question further down in the poll asks, how many of you think that the rich are paying their fair share? And boy, oh boy, it's trust me, most folks don't believe that the rich are actually paying their share of taxes. So yeah, I think a lot of anger, a lot of confusion, but once again, a lot of uncertainty. Times are tough, and I'll be the first to admit that if I was 20 years old right now, starting off again, I would be scared witless about my economic future.
All right, on that note, have a good weekend, James.
Always a pleasure, Dan. It was a great talking to both of you before you get cut loose into the general population.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been great fun.
Same,
Thanks.
James.
Likewise. Back to fantasy camp's over for me, back to work, and always a pleasure. I just love hearing James talk about Quebec politics.